like to now introduce Anna Debenham. She is one woman who's going to come up and talk about, again, circles, as we've talked a lot about, and how the idea that everything that we need to succeed already exists within us. So welcome, Anna.
Thank you. So I'm on Courtney's peace story. I want to know what that is. I'm like, I've got some of those stories. So I actually wasn't here this morning because I was doing a graduation with women in prison. And so I'm really sorry that I missed this morning, but I love the talk that I've just heard. And I can totally relate to some of Sadie's stories. Oh, you can't hear me, sorry. I'm shy. But just to kind of, to break my own kind of anxiety ice here, I got a story that's not actually a peace story, but it's kind of a butt story. So I'm thinking, everyone's like. So I was teaching in India many years ago, and I got really bad dysentery and giardia and kind of stomach problems, and it was kind of off the back of kind of having a weak stomach anyway. I'd had bulimia for many years, but that's part of my other story. And it was really bad, and I was kind of, for some reason I thought that to get it better or to do something with my mind and everything that was kind of all interconnected, I should do a 10-day silent meditation retreat where you meditate from 4 o'clock in the morning till 9 o'clock at night, and you just sit and try and kind of quieten the mind, which was really hard for me back then, seeing as I had a really busy mind and my stomach was killing me. But I'd gone and I did a fast before the retreat, thinking that whatever's inside me, I need to kill because it was causing so much pain. And so I didn't eat for like 9 days before I went on this retreat. And then I was in this meditation retreat. On about day 8, I was coming out, and it was like just tense, and it was pitch black, and it was in the mountains, and I felt this thing in my bum. I can't believe I'm telling this story. Oh my God. I think I may have told you. I don't know if I've told you. We never had it. I don't often tell the story. And I felt this thing in my bum, and I was like, am I meant to be pushing that back in or pulling it out? Like, I didn't actually, and I was making all these faces like, oh, Jesus Christ. And I was standing at the side of this little path, and this assistant woman came to me, and she's like, are you okay? Do you want me to do something? I was like, no. I've got something in my bum. I don't know what to do about it. But like, and she's like, do you want me to have a look? I was like, no, I'll do it. So then I really can't believe it. So then I kind of like tugged at it and like started pulling it around my wrist, and was like pulling it out, and then I just kind of flung it out onto the floor, and it was like a worm that was like about that long. And we weren't allowed to speak, and so the other people were coming past in the meditation thing going, what the fuck? I was like, you don't want to know. And then the assistant woman came to me the next day, and she was like, I put your worm under that tree in case you want to see it. Anyway, that's my peace story. But anyway, where do I start? I'm also thinking I should have had slides, so I wasn't very prepared. But anyway, so I can really relate. I growing up, I had a lot of insecure thinking, a lot of not good enough, a lot of I could be, I've got to be better. What I need is out here, and I've got to have a better body and all the rest of it. And I was a really bad, disciplined dieter. And at the time, when I was 14 years old and I was at school, it actually it sounds kind of, I look back and it's funny, but it wasn't funny at the time. But I was such a lazy dieter. I had just developed bulimia, because you could eat what you want and then throw it up. And to me, that actually seemed like an easier option. And so at 14, my parents got divorced when I was 7, and I went to boarding school at 7, and I was away from home a lot. And there was a lot of competition around body image and stuff. And the 1 year that I went back home, it was so challenging living with my mother that actually I developed this more to kind of have emotional release, because we always had to be kind of calm and quiet because she was sort of quite difficult and suicidal. And so throwing up was actually a really, it served me at the time, because it was a way of kind of emotionally releasing a lot of stuff that I'd pushed down. But it developed into a 20-25 year thing. And so most of my life I spent trying to sort it out in some way or another, trying to make myself better, trying to do something with the insecure, worthless, kind of agitated feelings of myself, and so I was always on a quest to find something, and that was really what my work, where my work started. So I worked a lot in addiction, I worked in rehab, I worked with different organizations in London, because I also took a lot of drugs and alcohol, kind of intersecting all three. And so it felt like what I did for work was always kind of guiding me to trying to find my own balance and my own sort of more healthy state of mind. And when I was in London, Still, I mean, I've never seen this program, Hoarders, but it kind of speaks for itself. But it was like when I think about how much thinking I had about what I could do and what I couldn't do and how good I was at something or how bad I was at something, it felt like a house where, you know, people are kind of have a lot of things built up and you're kind of walking through a narrow pathway in your house. And that's what my thinking felt like. Like, you know, it's like, oh, I can't do that. I definitely can't stand up and speak in front of people. That's impossible. You know, and I'd kind of go around and live my life in a way that was really kind of narrow and very kind of hard to navigate most of the time. And then I had lived in America, and then I went back to England, and I came across an understanding of the mind that changed my life. I didn't think I was okay. I thought I was broken. I thought that there was something that was lost along the way. I didn't know that I could. I didn't feel that there was a way to be okay. Like I was looking for some mental clarity, but all the way through, sometimes there'd been these little moments of like, I'll get through this. I'm going to be okay. I'll get through this. And really starting to understand that innate well-being is built in, that it's our default setting, that all I'm doing, I was looking at the what wasn't working and what was wrong, rather than focusing and looking at what was actually okay about me that was underneath everything that looked, you know, like it was broken. And also, so there was something in what I heard when I was at this Institute for the Mind, seeing the experience of life is coming from the inside out rather than the outside in. And it started to feel true for me that I wasn't experiencing, like with my body, for example, I wasn't experiencing my body, I was experiencing my thinking, because my body can look exactly the same, and sometimes I fucking hated it and wanted to, you know, and then sometimes it's like I didn't care about it, and sometimes I thought it was okay. And sometimes life looked really, really hard, and like I couldn't get through it. But other days it looked like I could do it, I could get through it. And so I started to notice, well, that's true. Like my experience of life is coming through thought in the moment. The variable is my state of mind. The variable isn't the outside world. And I started to see that it's not the outside world, it's not circumstances and events that are making me feel any certain way. And when I was in this institute, I was working with this organization called Beyond Recovery, and they had just got a grant from the government to work in prison, to share this understanding of the mind in prison, and to see how it reduced recidivism and anger and violence and depression and anxiety and stuff. And the woman who ran the organization wanted to volunteer to go into prison, so I was like, yeah, that sounds like really interesting for me. And I was actually there for business, but like going into prison seemed a lot more fun than doing business. So it started this love affair with prison, which wasn't something that I ever thought that I was going to do. But what was fascinating is that I had some idea that me understanding my own mind and that I had innate health, that I was okay underneath all the thinking, that I was okay, I had well-being. I thought, well, yeah, of course I can feel that because I've done every self-help thing under the sun. I've had all this different therapy. I've been in this training and this training and this training. So okay, I get it. But people who are in a maximum security prison and who have done all sorts of different things, and also, I'm curious, like how are they going to see their own innate health? Like how are they going to see that it's not their circumstances that are making them feel any certain way or events that are happening in their life, but it's actually through thought in the moment. And it was fascinating. And the research was amazing. And sitting in rooms with people who started to come alive. Because when you point to people's mental sickness or you point to what's not working, we see more of it. But when we pointed to mental health and when we pointed to what's underneath all the thinking and the feeling, there's something else. There's an intelligence. There's a wisdom that's living us that never goes anywhere. And it was just kind of pointing back there and kind of bringing that to life. And the results of the research were amazing, but it was seeing how people saw experience and saw their state of mind and saw life around them totally change and find their freedom in prison. Even though they were going to be there for many years, they recognized that they were just creating this negative story over and over again about what was going on and seeing through this lens of kind of all sorts of anxiety and anger and frustration and all sorts of different things. But when they started to see that feelings are a reflection of thought, nothing more, that it's not like he made me feel a certain way, that's why I've got to go react to that. It's not like my thinking's making me feel a certain way. I don't have to do anything. And so the level of violence and started to go down, and it was actually a really fascinating study. So then I moved back to America and wasn't working nothing to do with prison when I was here before, but I really wanted to work in prison, and it was I remember like wondering, how the hell am I going to get into prison? It's yeah. In a way that I can come out every night was the challenge. And I had a lot of insecure thinking about, I can't do this. I had so much, I'm not worthy, how can I get this done? I can't do this. And I had that my whole life, and it kind of was this old thinking that started to come back, like, I don't know how to do this. And then I remember walking, going for a walk, and I had an insight, and I realized, and it just kind of came to me as like, there's nothing I can do in the world that's going to make me any more whole than I already am. And I'd spent so much time looking outside of me to find my wholeness. If I do this, then I'll be okay. If I make this much money, then I'll be okay. If I feel better in this way, then I'm going to be okay. And when I reach this thing, then I'm going to be okay. And it was always, everything was outside of me. Like I'm only okay if this happens, and when I feel like this, and when I feel better, or when I've cleared up all my problems, then I'm going to be okay. And it suddenly occurred to me on a deeper level that I'm okay. And that when I recognized that and thinking kind of fell away, like well-being comes back to the surface. It's like a beach ball you're holding down, and you feel like you're drowning because you've got like so much heaviness on top of it. And the minute you have a new thought, like it's like, no, I got this. I'm going to be okay. And in that moment, like a whole bunch of negative thinking fell away, what I can't do. And then it was like, and this is like so basic, but I hadn't even thought of this before because I had so much shit going on in my head. I could just put out on Facebook, does anyone know anyone who's ever been in prison? Like that's like the first thing that you'd think of to do, but I just didn't think of it. And I was like, I could do that. So I put out I put out on Facebook to see, does anyone know anyone who's been in prison? And then a friend of mine got in touch with me and said that they knew someone who used to volunteer. So then I had a conversation with him, and then I had a conversation with someone else, and I had a conversation with someone else. And the difference for me is like, my well-being isn't dependent on whether someone says yes or no. My well-being isn't dependent on whether I get in or this person is going to like be the person that's going to get me in. So I had less on it. So it's like, if it works out, it works out. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I honestly thought, you know what, I could work in a coffee shop. It doesn't actually matter. My wholeness isn't dependent on whatever it is that I do out here. But with that knowing, it all got really easy because I got nothing on it. Because there was nothing of Anna that was on the line. Oh, what's Anna going to look like if they don't like me? Or what's Anna going to look like if it doesn't work? All these things that I thought that I needed to do. And so I just showed up to meetings, and then I got into this, had this conversation with this person in prison. And it was actually the chaplain at one of the prisons who was like, what I know is when people really heal, it's going to be when they connect with something on the inside. Now, I do it, he was talking about him, I do it through religion and through spirituality and finding God, or whatever religion, that different things, but what you're doing is you're pointing to the same thing, that well-being that's inside of us, that wisdom, that innate intelligence. It doesn't need to look like God or spirit. It's just that it can be resilience. Whatever it looks like, you're pointing to it. And so it's like, it's going to speak to a whole bunch of people that maybe wouldn't come to classes in prison connected to any sort of religion. So we started there, and we had our first group, and it was only about 7 or 8 people. And then through word of mouth, and it grew we just had a graduation this week of 28 guys, and we've got another 50 on the waiting list for our next group. And what everyone loves about it is they're told all the time that they're broken and they need fixing and there's something wrong. And then I was told to come to this group because there's nothing wrong with me and I'm okay. And they say, we don't really do anything in here. But it's like, well, that's kind of true, because it's like, you don't need, like, take your trying brain out of the way. Like, I had a training teacher today, was like, I kind of fired, her name's Ruthie. She's like, I fired Ruthie. It's like getting in the way of trying to fix everything and try to do stuff. And it's like, there's nothing to do. In fact, like, do less. And actually, when you do less, when you get out of your own way, life tends to go better. And so these groups in the men's prison started to grow. And then we had a meeting in the women's prison. And they were like, you need to do some research, because if this is going to be taken seriously, it needs to be evidence-based. And they didn't want the evidence that we had from England. They wanted their own. So we met a amazing woman called Dr. Sarah Bowen from Pacific University, who does a lot of research with mindfulness and addiction and different things. And she was really interested. So we're now in we're now in year 2 of our research, and at the women's prison. And before we started there, it's so funny when you hear people, because people say to me at the beginning, you don't want to start a non-profit. Because I thought, I'll just do prison on the side and then I'll do my proper job. And then at some point someone said to me, you really love this, why don't you just do this? And I was like, yeah, that actually makes sense, because I really like going to prison. And then they wanted to do a research project. It's like, I think I can't just have a research project that's just Anna Debenham. It's got to be like with an organization. So then we formed the Insight Alliance. It was, but everyone's like, you don't want to start a nonprofit, it's really hard work. Like, you're going to be just working like 18 hours a day for like 15 years. But I knew enough to know that that's not my thinking. Like, that's their experience, but it doesn't mean it's true. So I'm not gonna take that on and go, okay, I'm not gonna do a nonprofit because you say that it's really hard work. Like, hard work is just life. You just show up and do the next thing in front of you. But if I have a lot of thinking about it and think that it's going to be hard, then it's going to be like I've got this weight of thought on it, and it makes it harder, rather than just like, this is just life. And so yeah, it's work. Like, I had a long week, but it's just doing the next thing in front of me without a lot on it. And without a lot on it, Anna's not on the line, and I can just show up and do what I do. And so, with the groups in the women's prison, and this is all just organically kind of, unfolding, because I got no plan whatsoever. And and then we kind of like, we got this organization, and then we started to kind of, you know, get we were fiscally sponsored, and then we started to be our own thing, and then we we started to do our first teacher training, because I'm realizing I can't do all of it, because we're being asked to expand to other facilities, and especially, you know, the men and the women say this, but at the time the men were like, why didn't we learn this in school? Like, what if I knew this, I wouldn't be here. We need to work with youth. And so then we were like, then we got a connection to McLaren and the youth prison, and next week's our first graduation with the youth. And like, thank you. It's amazing when you point someone back to their innate health. You know, they've got so many diagnoses about things, but when you point them back, when you point anyone back to their true nature, to who they are underneath all this, it's like, you know, and the boys were saying yesterday, they were like, you know, this goes on there, but our well-being's still intact, we're still good. Yo, bro, we're still intact, we got our well-being. You know, and they kind of have this thing now where they're like, I'm good. Like, all this stuff goes on in my circumstances, and yeah, but we've got to do this, and yeah, we've got to do this, but they're good, they're okay. And some of them are there for a really long time, but it's like, I'm not stuck, I've got freedom of mind. Like, you know, the psychological freedom that we find when we get out of our own way and we recognize how life is being experienced moment to moment, we got less on it, and we got less thinking about it, and then they can have new ideas and new experiences, even being in prison. So, you know, and then they have insights which are really fun, and they learn from each other. Like, there was this one guy, we'd actually, I sometimes bring in different things that point back to what we're pointing to. Like, I love the poem, The Guest House by Rumi, which I'm sure many of you know. But it's like, this being human as a guest house, every moment a new arrival, a joy, a meanness, like, welcome them all, like, it's all okay, like, every feeling, every experience, it's all okay. And then this guy, at the end of that, he's like, you know, I see my mind like my house. And my house used to just be filthy. It was chaotic, it was crazy, it was just full of noise. But now my house is actually really, really calm, and it's peaceful, and it's you know, everything's put away, and the dishes are done, and I've vacuumed the carpets, and I've made the beds, and it's really great. And he said, I'm sitting there, and I'm just admiring my house, and just thinking how amazing it is. And he's like, and then a chicken walks in. And we're like, what? A chicken? And he's like, yeah, a chicken walks in. He's like, have you ever tried to catch a chicken? And he's like, it doesn't go well. Your feathers flying everywhere, and there's dirt everywhere. But if you just let a chicken like wander around and peck on the floor, it will find its own way out of the door quite happily. And it's like thought. Like, if I go chasing thoughts around my head, like, it doesn't go well. And I just get caught up and go crazy. But actually, if I just let my thoughts come and go, and they just like let them do what they want to do without actually getting in the way, then things go better. And I've got a quiet house. And then other people start kind of recognizing that, have their own insights kind of off the back of other people's insights, you know. And it's fun to be in that, to be in those circles where we feel safe and connected and very seen and heard, and recognizing each other's health and well-being, and people that have been in different gangs who are in the same group, or someone who's a white supremacist with then, you know, African Americans or you know, different sexual orientations and various different things, and they start to recognize their similarities rather than their separateness by seeing what's fundamentally true about all human beings. Whether you know it or not, we all have this spiritual nature underneath all the noise that's kind of still living us. We're breathing. It operates our systems perfectly well, as the same way that it's like operating new thought and new ideas, that we're not always just one thing. The mind changes, and we can see new things, and we can come out of our crazy kind of thinking into kind of peace and quiet. And that's when we see that, when we see the fluidity, then there's kind of they recognize their connection. I do that too, or that's me, like I do that. Or people who think that they're different, or they've got different values around gangs, and then they realize actually they're very similar, and that they start kind of becoming friends. And it's it's so fun to be doing this in an environment where people are starting to recognize the men's prison we work in is a mental health prison, and a lot of them are on medication. And this has nothing to do with the program, people, whether they're on medication or not. Like, it's like, I have no thinking about whether someone's on medication, but someone will come in and go, you know, I just reduced my anxiety medication because I realize anxiety is just a feeling. Like, it comes and goes, and when I start overthinking it and making it worse, then it gets worse. But when I see it as weather pattern kind of moving through and I don't put more energy into it, it passes by itself. And so some of this medication I'm taking is starting to feel redundant. And they start to naturally, with their counselor, just come off their medication, or people who have been through war and PTSD, or women who've had, you know, sexual trauma or abuse in their, you know, before they came to prison, and have symptoms of kind of thinking that they're continually revisiting their experience, rather than seeing, well, no, I'm not there anymore. This is just thought created in the moment that's giving me this experience, and it's not actually happening now. And then they start to recognize the fluid nature of thought, and then able to move through it and have a very different experience. And I actually got a card from some of the women today that I was going to bring and read a little bit, but I've forgotten it. So for me, in my own journey, in my own story, it's like letting go of all the limitations that I thought that I had about what I could do. Like, if you'd asked me 10 years ago if I'd be running an organization that's working in prison, doing research projects, it's like, no, fuck off, there's no way I'm gonna be doing that. I'm completely useless. But it was like, that was just Anna and her interpretation of what was possible. And it's like when I fired Anna, you know, it's like, then I just show up, and it's like, there's no way it needs to go. There's no right way or wrong way, or it should look like this, or it should look like that. It's like, it doesn't matter, because I'm still good. Like, I'm still okay. Like, and there's people sometimes ask, you know, but you're working in prison, like, does it bog you down? Do you feel, you know, and does it get, and all the stuff that's going on around the prison system and these kids that are in prison for years, and like, how do you think about that? Must be a lot of thought about that. And it reminds me of a story from a colleague, Dr. Bill Pettit, who works in mental health, and he tells a story about when he's got 2 kids and a wife, and his wife died of cancer very early on, and his kids were very young, and they were going to grow up without a mother. And a lot of people were like, you must be so worried. You must be so worried about your kids. I mean, it's going to be so awful, them growing up without a mother. And he's like, I love my kids too much to worry about them. They don't need my worry, they need my presence. And when I heard that, I was like, that's so true. You know, like, my life doesn't need my worry, my life needs my presence. The world doesn't need my worry, it needs my presence. And so if I'm worried about all the shit that I have no control over, then it just takes me away from me being present in my life and doing what I can do moment to moment and day by day. And so it's like, no, I don't worry about that stuff. I'm doing what I can do with the resources and with the people that I'm helping, and find myself kind of just showing up and not worrying about the world, but being present. And it continues to be a really fun exploration, not just for myself, but all the people that I work with, and seeing kind of transformation. So thank you.